Hey guys, all right, so today is your first day of learning a new skill over with distance learning. And so again, if you have any questions about any of the material throughout it, make sure you take a picture of it, send it to me. And again, just remember what we talked about in my last video. We're gonna be patient, we're gonna get through this, and it's gonna be great. All right, so today we're going to be talking about exponent rules. And specifically, we're just going to focus on multiplying exponents in this video, okay? So there's three different ways you can multiply exponents. So this first one that I've highlighted, and if you want to pause the video and write these notes down beforehand so you're ready when we talk about it, that is one option, or you can just kind of go with me and pause it throughout. Whatever you need to do, whatever works best for you, okay? So I've highlighted this first one yellow, the products of powers rule. The other one is a power of a power rule, and the last one is the power of a product rule. Okay, so let's just kind of focus in on this first one, the product of powers rule. So this says when you have, let me go up here, sorry. All right, so it says when you're multiplying powers that have the same base, you're going to add the exponents, okay? So really make sure you write this rule down somewhere when we're talking about the product of a powers rule, because that's really important. So we can see in this little example that it gives us that they both have the same base, which in this case is A. And so that means we're going to take the exponents, m and n, and we're going to add them together. Okay, so let's look at this example that they give us here. Okay, so we can call this example 1. All right, so go ahead and write this down with me. So we have 4, 4a to the third power b, and since b is not raised to any power, it's understood to be 1. Okay, and then we're multiplying it times 3a squared b to the 5th power. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to multiply these two different terms. Okay, so first we're going to take the 4 and multiply it times the 3. Okay, so 4 times 3 we know is 12. Okay, now we're going to multiply this term. Okay, we can see that a and a have the same base. You can't multiply a and multiply it times b. You can't do that. Those are two different terms. Okay, so just focus on the ones that have that same base. Okay, so that's a, and then we take that exponent 3 and that exponent 2, and we're going to add those two together. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like this and we'll simplify it here in a second. Okay, then we're going to look at our next term, b. So this has the same base as this one right here. So again, we're going to take that base and then we're going to take the exponents and we're going to add them together. So if we were going to take this entire term and simplify it all the way down, we would have 12a. We're going to add those exponents, so to the 5th power, and then b, 1 plus 5 is b to the 6th power. And then that is how you would have your answer simplified. Okay, so it's not too bad. It's just remembering what those rules are. So again, if it has the same base, then you are going to add the exponents. Okay, let's do one more of those just to make sure that we've got it. Okay, so then we'll write this one down as example 2. Okay, so I'm going to do 2a to the 4th power b squared times 3a squared b squared. Okay, so just like we did on the last problem, we are just going to multiply our like terms. Okay, so my first like terms, where am I at? Here I am. I have 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 we know is 6. Okay, I'll change colors real quick. All right, next I have the same base, A and A. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the A down, and I have A to the 4th power times A to the 2nd power, and when they have the same base and you're multiplying, remember that's an important part of it, if you're multiplying them, then you will take it and you just add those two things together. All right, last one, we have our B. So we'll take that B and we'll take that B, and then we're going to add those exponents. Okay, so if I were to scroll down, then we can just simplify that final problem as 6A, 4 plus 2 would make that to the 6th power. B, 2 plus 2, I would make that to the 4th power. And that would be your final answer. We could not simplify that any further, so that's just how you would leave it. All right, let's go on to the next rule. So our next rule is a power of a power. So we'll just label this as rule number 2. Okay, so the rule here, which I've written down here, I would write this down somewhere going with that rule. Okay, so when you're raising a power to a power, this time now we are going to multiply those exponents. So the last one we looked at, product of powers, since we were multiplying them, we added the two exponents together. And now it's a power of a product, or a power of a power, I'm sorry. So we're going to now multiply those together. And I'm going to show you why here in a second, why those are different. Okay, so you can see an example here. We have a base of A. Okay, they just use A. It could be X, it could be Y, whatever. And it's to some power. Okay, so then they're taking that and then they are taking that to the power again. Okay, so for example, here's our first example 1. It wants us to simplify B to the 5th power to cubed. Okay, so that's essentially like saying B to the 5th power times B to the 5th power times B to the 5th power. Okay, and so when it's raising it to the power, that's essentially like saying B to the 15th power. Okay, because what they did, just like they show up here, is they took the two exponents, the 5 and the 3, and they multiplied them together. So 5 times 3 would give us that 15. Okay, so let's look at one more just to make sure that we understand that rule. Okay. So here's example 2. All right, so I have X to the 4th power cubed. Okay, so when we have a number and it's to a power and it's being raised to another power, we have to multiply our two exponents. Okay, so you could just say it's X to the 12th power. And that would be your final answer. That would be it in simplest form. Because what you're doing is you're doing X to the 4th power times X to the 4th power times X to the 4th power. Because there's 3, so 1, 2, 3. So that would be X to the 12th. Because in the last one, it said if we have all of the same bases, then you add all of them. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 would give you 12. Okay, so you can kind of see how those are interlocked or they're intertwined together. Okay, last one. And don't worry, there's going to be more practice problems here in a second. So if it's still a little confusing to you, don't worry, we're going to keep practicing it. All right, and now we are doing the power of a product. So the last rule right here goes with the power of a product. So make sure all this is nice and labeled and neat in your notes. So when it says when raising a product, so remember product means when you're multiplying a power to a power, you're going to distribute the exponent. Okay, so we have two different numbers here, two different variables in this case, a times b, and then we're raising it to the m power. Okay, now I know it's kind of confusing when it's not actual numbers in the examples, but just bear with me here. Okay, so what you're going to do is if you are multiplying something, you have a product here. Okay, that's our product. And it's being raised to an exponent. You have to make sure that you distribute that exponent to everything inside the parentheses before you can simplify it. Okay, so what they did was they did a to the m power times b to the m power, and you can see that you can see that over here. All right, now let's look at an actual example with numbers in it, because I feel like that's always a little bit more easy to understand. So let's look at the first example. So we'll call this example 1. So we have 3a squared b to the 5th power cubed. Okay, so when we see that we have things that are being multiplied inside of our parentheses, and then all of that is being taken to another exponent, then you have to take this exponent and distribute it to everything inside of your parentheses first. Okay, so that's going to be 3 to the 3rd power, which I'm going to write down the steps before I actually simplify it. So that's 3 to the 3rd power times, we have a squared to the 3rd power. Now remember from our last rule that we looked at, if you have an exponent being taken to the exponent, what do? You multiply them. So that's, you take your base a, and we're going to do 2 times 3, because it's an exponent being taken to another exponent. Okay, times, bring down that next base b, and again we have an exponent being taken up to a power, so that's going to be 5 times 3. Okay, so now let's simplify. Let me change colors because you'll know how I like to do that. It's too green. Okay, so we have 3 to the 3rd power. So that's 3 times 3 times 3, which would be 27, times, we can bring down our base. Well, actually, we don't even need this little multiplication symbol. We can just do the a. And then we have 2 times 3, which is 6, times, what? We don't need that. We have the b, 5 times 3 is 15. And that would be our final answer. So you can see how all of those other rules kind of build into this final rule. You got to remember all of those things. Okay, so that would be your final answer. That would be it in the most simplified form. So remember, you have to distribute first, and then you simplify after that. All right, let's look at one more example from this, and then that will be the end of the video. Okay, so last part. Okay, so this is going to be example, whoa, one second. Okay, so this is example 2. So I have 3x squared y, and all of that is being taken to the 2nd power. Okay, so first thing I notice is that there's a lot of stuff being multiplied inside my parentheses, and then all of it is being taken to an exponent. Okay, so when all of my product is being taken to a power, then I have to remember to, one second, Let me change my colors. I have to remember to distribute my exponent. Okay, so I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to distribute it to everything inside of my parentheses first. Okay, so that would be 3 squared. So I'm just going to write that down here, 3 squared, and we'll simplify that at the end. Okay, so then I have x squared squared. So I'll write that down. I have x squared squared. Okay, so again, all I've done is distribute that squared through. Okay, and then I have y. It doesn't have an exponent, so if it doesn't have an exponent, it's understood to be 1. Okay, so then I have y to the 1 squared. Okay, so I'm going to kind of zoom out just a little bit so you can maybe see our last rule. Kind of see how they're linked together. Okay, so I'm still down here. All right, so I'm down here. So I have 3 squared, which is 3 times 3, which is 9. And then I have x squared squared, okay? So that looks a lot like what we did with the power of a power rule, okay? If you have an exponent or if you have a base that's to a power, if you're raising a power to a power, you multiply them. So that's 2 times 2. So that would be x. Oh my gosh. X to the 4th power. Okay? And then we have our base to a power to a power. So you just multiply those two exponents. So y, 1 times 2 is 2. And that would be your final answer. Okay? So just keep in mind that there's a lot of different rules. You just have to know what you're looking at when you see it. So again, looking up over here at the first rule we looked at, the product of powers rule. If you're multiplying and they have the same exact base, you're adding them together. Okay? If there's just one base, now I'm looking over here, there's just one base, and there's 2 exponents that you're dealing with, then you multiply the exponents. So we add it over here, we're multiplying here, and then finally, if you have an exponent on the outside of your parentheses, you have to distribute. Okay, so that's it for this first lesson. I'm going to make a second video working through practice problems that you will also be expected to do. Make sure that you take a picture of your notes, watch the video on how to upload them to Google Classroom for your grade for Monday. Okay? All right, see you guys.